Hi, my name is Ryan Fee, and I'm making this video on behalf of iPokerVIP.net. A little bit about me real quick. I started out playing poker at the end of 2006 at 10 cent, 25 cent full ring, and have since moved up to 25.50 and some nosebleeds, though after Black Friday I've been playing primarily 5.10 and 10.20. Um, a little bit about my relationship with teaching poker. I wrote a book, a six max book, a while ago, as kind of a something to give back to the community because I felt like I'd been given so much at the time. And I was subsequently made part of BlueFirePoker.com to do videos for them, which I soon after the launch decided was not such a great idea because I didn't think it was a good idea to share the ideas and concepts that, essentially built the edge that I had in poker. So I've since been a lot more secretive about poker information and strategy and discussing it and things like that. But Jamie is a good friend of mine and an affiliate, and he wanted to add some content to his website, and he does such an awesome job of helping me out with whatever random affiliate stuff, and he's always there and attentive and gets back to me. So I was more than happy to break my rule and kind of do him a favor. So yeah, Jamie's a great guy, and if you need an affiliate, I definitely would recommend him. I recommend him to all my friends. But let's get into the action. I'm playing a Party 1-2 6 max no limit session. I found these games to be extremely good. There were some regs, or I guess I should say some regs. There was one reg that did something that I thought was really solid, where he just re-raised and barreled me on a board that I thought was it was a pretty intelligent spot to re-raise barrel. I was slow playing, so I ended up having it. So it was cool that I got to see his hand, so I know a lot more about how he thinks. But I mean, other than that, this session was just a mishmash of fish, bad regs, type players that you can really take advantage of if you know what you're doing and you're focused on what you're doing. So I'm going to talk pretty quickly through this video because normally when I watch these I get really bored because I I've been kind of more advanced player for a while now, so most of the time 90% of what somebody would talk about, it would just be boring. So I'm going to talk pretty quickly to try and keep the attention of the guys that are more advanced, and a lot of the stuff's automatic. So if you are more of a beginner or you don't understand what I'm saying, I'll be sure to talk clearly, so just go back and re-watch it, but that will be calculated. So anyway, alright, let's stop with 3-7 as soon as I 3-bet it, and I'll explain. Okay, cool. Now I'll let it go through. Alright. Okay, so I have a note system. I've 4 main categories. It's reg, bad reg, fish, and short stacker. And in these games, I didn't see all that many short stackers. So reg yellow, bad reg green, and fish is blue. So I'm in a pot. We have 50 big blinds with a fish that min raised from middle position, a fish that called the small blind. Fish just play so bad in 3-bet pots that it almost doesn't matter what your hand is. I expect to just be able to c-bet, take it down a ton, or know when to give up. I think just everything should just be extremely easy in 3-bet pots with the initiative. So I think there's a ton of value in 3-betting anything playable here rather than just overcalling with it, especially when there's 2 fish in the pot. So I have a chance to build a reasonable sized pot that they just give up post flop. So I decided to make a really loose 3-bet and just squeeze them, hope to get them to see the flop, and then c-bet and likely take it down very often. You'll notice I fold queen jack offsuit in the top left. There's a cutoff open in the small blind, which I think standard. I think if you're 3-betting that, you're likely 3-betting too wide, but not necessarily. It's pretty close. It depends how often they're raising and then how often they're folding. Anyway, so yeah, so we get a really good flop with 3-7, ace-6-6 rainbow. If they don't have an ace or a 6, like, they're probably done. And that's like definitely the majority of the time. And they would definitely believe that I would have an ace to 3-bet. So, yeah, I mean, c-bet a little bit more than half pot. Don't be too greedy and make it small, because then maybe you'll get like a fishy float. But yeah, I mean, c-bet 24 into 40 and expect to show an immediate profit, which I mean, obviously you really need to do because you don't have much equity. But I mean, yeah, I would love to see bet. If I could just replay that situation over and over and over again, when I 3-bet that hand gets that flop and I get to see bet, I would do it in a heartbeat. So yeah, you'll notice that like throughout the video, one thing that I'll do is when I have a marginal raise situation and there are fish or weaker players left to act, I'll tend to go for it more. But when it's like mostly regs, I'll tend to give up a ton, especially if they're 3-betting me a lot, because the hands that are on the margin that I would be raising, if they're going to 3-bet me, I'm just going to fold to it with whatever hands are on the margin. So that's like a good way to filter out whether or not you should be greedy and steal. This 9-4 suited, I thought the big blind was a fish, so I made like a really loose raise. But I think I later find out that guy's like the one short stacker was in these games. So I think in retrospect that should have just been a fold. King 5 versus the fish on this board, I'm just going to try and show it down. And then when it gets down and he just half pots, I mean, I beat the board and he might think we're both playing the board and just try to like fold out a chop. So I mean, I think it's a super easy call. Plus, like, I mean, like, what is he really value betting on ace 9-9 queen? He just doesn't have that many hands he could reasonably value bet. The bottom right, same thing. Just gonna relentlessly ISO the fish with anything remotely playable and try to get him to call and then check fold the flop versus c-bet. But I get 4-bet by the other fish, and he makes it big enough to where, with his stack size and my pot odds, I just don't have the implied odds to call, so I just fold. Queen Jack, when I think it's like a reverse blind structure, I'm not sure. Party's kind of funny about its heads up. I don't, maybe now it's regular, but I think it's just too weak to get in. Ace 3, standard raise from the cutoff, and when I get heads up and I get a gutter, overcard, and backdoor flush draw on like a low board texture that he probably doesn't coordinate with all that often, c-bet for sure. It's like easy. Like, I'm c-betting that board a ton, and it's an easy spot to c-bet. Here at the 10-3 suited, I think he's probably folding enough to just 3-bet small as a bluff. I probably wouldn't do that later on into like a match heads up with somebody short, like 3-bet fold 30 big blinds. But he's like a 6-max short stacker, he probably doesn't know what's going on, and heads up, he probably just folds too much, so I think it's a good spot to bluff. Meanwhile, I am going to look to find another table and switch that out. Here with ace deuce, I could have bet the flop. I think you could kind of coin flip. But it sucks because if I was in the big blind, I'd be more likely to bet the flop because then I wouldn't be out of position versus two potential players that could continue. So the big blind, it probably leans a little bit more towards a bet, but I mean, you could take a free card as well. And then on the turn, I wouldn't hate a check call, but it really, again, it does suck with like the other fish who's there who, if it was a reg, I would be more likely to continue there because it's likely if the reg had anything at that point, he wouldn't have checked twice. He probably would have put in a bet. So I can assume that he's done with the hand and that I'll be heads up. But when it's a fish, like I could totally see him having a 7 or 8 or whatever and then continuing. And again, if I have to be out of position with like bottom pair versus two players, it's kind of sucks. So yeah, I mean, I don't totally hate just giving up. I mean, I would, and the other thing is the only way I would continue if I didn't bet the flop and I was playing a lot of tables. I'm sorry, if I was playing a lot of tables and I didn't bet the flop, I would mostly be giving up. But when I'm 4-tabling, like maybe I'll continue because I can like focus on the situation and really try to think about like what are these, like what kind of shenanigans are going on. But yeah, if I was like multi-tabling and bet that flop, was probably the only way I would continue with that hand on that board. The other fish, when I flop 2 overs in a gutter, I think that hand for sure, especially in a heads-up pot, is for sure strong enough to put in a bet with. So yeah, I just bet and take it down, and I was probably going to bet at least 2 and maybe 3. Although I do find that I get called there on the river a ton, so maybe not. In unraised pots where I barrel flop and turn, I would say the river gets called, like, and they call. I would say the river gets called a ton. Was there? Man, I think there might have been a hand top right that I should have addressed, but I think it was like a small pot, so it's no big deal. I joined. Oh, okay. The table that I joined was this guy. I'd seen him like sitting around, so I thought he was some sort of reg. So I thought I could like get a game going with the guy we're now playing heads up. So yeah, so like my reads on him is just like he's a reg and he might be winning because he has 300 big blinds at this table. So maybe he's like a better than average reg. Most of the time, the people that sit at tables waiting for action are either better than average regs or like bum hunters. There's normally not much in between. And then here I'm just sort of doing some guesswork with I'm just guessing these guys are all regs, but then I kind of thought about it and realized that I mean you get a nice mix of players that end up at the party 1-2 games. So I ended up changing their notes to orange, which is actually like another category of not sure if regular. So and so yeah, you'll see me change that in a second. Here, let me pause to 2 spots. I don't know if I don't think there's been much history with me and this fish on the video, but I have been playing with this fish with the A7. I've kind of been pounding on him a decent amount, and when he re-raises that small, I have A7, I think easy to defend, because I get to play this pot in position with the fish who has no idea what he's doing. So once I get to this flop, the money's probably going to go in one way or another. I mean, yeah. Like if he checks, I'll play it like it's the nuts, and if he triples, we'll see what happens, but it's probably going in one way or the other. Here with Queen 6 on this board texture, I mean, I'm just never bluffing this board when I bet this board after I raise and get called from all these spots. So since I'm never bluffing, and I could expect to continue on quite a bit, I'm going to bet pretty big here, just because I don't want to give them a good price to continue, and I want to get value when I have value bets. And as an overall strategy for like just a bet size on this flop, I think that bigger is the way to go because so many turns change what's going on with this board. The A7, he bets really small. I call. I think I'm just gonna. If he's betting, I'm calling, and if he's checking, I'm betting. I think is the way that this is going to play out, unless he's just straight min bets or something. But Ace Jack on this board versus an unknown, I'm just showing down. I think that's just like the standard way to play this hand. Here versus Oliver, who's done this before. He's done like random leads and stuff. I mean, I think I don't know what could happen. Like I don't know if he's like folding or like what the hell he has when he leads. So I think the play is to just call. I mean, I'm getting a great price, and then I get there and he like bets really big. And I mean, he's a fish, so if he's a rig, you could make arguments for maybe just showing down. But since he's a fish, I mean, just definitely put it in. And then yeah, so A7, everything kind of went according to plan, and he bet small, checked. And I think when he does this, he probably, he has kings. I think he probably has almost exactly kings and queens. And he's just not gonna he could fold to a shove. I think psychologically he could fold to a shove, but I think that if you just bet 3/4 pot, he just will not be able to bring himself to fold that hand. Fish hate raising and folding, or just having good hands pre-flop and then realizing that their equity, the equity of the hand changes dramatically post-flop. Okay, so let me extend and talk about this ace jack. So under the gun opens, and I have ace jack and under the gun +1. I could definitely fold. I could definitely re-raise, bluff this hand, but I opt to call. I mean, there's a lot of factors. This is definitely a borderline hand. I opt to call mostly because of the button, who's a huge fish, and then the blinds there's one fish and one bad reg. So I don't expect to get squeezed or kind of owned when I'm playing a pot where I'm out of position, and there's a good chance that I play a pot where I'm in position versus 2 players. So I decide to call, try to get somebody else to come along, and sure enough, we get the guy on the button who's just been spewing all over the place. He's the guy that just played the hand where we made the flush, and he put in a bunch of the stack and then just folded because I guess he was buffing. So he flop trips, and I mean, there's nothing else to do on this flop but bet. or I'm sorry, to call when under the gun bets. Then under the gun bets again, and I'm calling again just because I mean, there's a variety of reasons of why with this hand, with any hand on this board texture, you should be calling. But the number one that comes to mind right now is that I want to call because I want this fish. I want the best pot for this fish to continue with whatever 2 cards he has in his hand, and I get chipped on, and like I end up being super excited about it. When this guy calls, even though it's like kind of like if you asked me, would you like to like quadruple the size of the pot, I would snap accept. I would love to get a lot more money in there, but as it turns out, I did not have the best hand. Pretty brutal turn, but I sucked out, so cool. Here with 4s, when I raising it defend, I mean, this is a board that he coordinates with a lot. I have no equity, and I'm just happy to show this down or give up. Versus aggression, when the bad reg, or I guess this guy should just be a fish, calls the small blind, I could check, but I think probably best off just half pot c-betting. Yeah, and you could just take that down a ton, and I have equity when called, and I'm perfectly happy with just winning that pot there, and risking half pot to just end the hand right there. I think's fine. And there's also a chance that he calls with worse. So when you call, you're not completely boned. Here with king queen off, I could cold 4-bet, but I'm normally, especially at 6 max, I'm really cautious about bluffing unless I have information that would suggest that there's a really good shot that it's going to work. So I'm normally kind of conservative, especially with pre-flop aggression. So I'm normally pretty conservative with my my pre-flop aggression, other than 3-betting from the blinds, which is just kind of the way to play from the blinds with most of your range. You just shouldn't be calling out of position. You should just mostly be 3-betting. So here with king jack, I thought about squeezing to try to get a heads up pot with the fish, but he hasn't really been raising all that much, so I'm definitely not going to fold because this guy is so bad. But I think squeezing probably gets me in a bad spot when called or whatever, or 4-bet. I mean, that's obviously bad. I flop gutter to the nuts, second nut flush, backdoor draw, and overcard. I decide to check call. Flush comes in on the turn, and I think the only play really is to lead here, because when I check, I just relinquish so much power, and it's perfectly reasonable for me to have a flush and play like this, and it's going to be just very difficult for me to win the hand when I double check this card. I'm not completely giving up on the pot, but I'm not thrilled about check calling 2 streets. I'd way rather bet and then evaluate the river, whatever it may be. It turns out the river's reasonably favorable for me. Versus this fish, I think shoving's too thin. I don't think you're going to get called by, I guess, ace queen or queen jack or whatever often enough. And he can definitely have, a decent amount of better hands in his range. There's a good chance he has showdown value, because the hands that he calls turn with that don't have showdown value are ace of diamonds hands, unless he considers a queen or 2 tens or 2 jacks that he decided to call a turn with to not have showdown value, which I don't think he would think about it like that. So the only hands he can really theoretically have that aren't wouldn't just be happy to just check and hopefully I have nothing or whatever, are like ace 10 and ace jack with a diamond, and probably the ace of diamonds. And he can't, because I have the king of diamonds. He has it kills a lot of the combos that he could possibly have that would be continuing hands. So I think the 2 plays are blocking bet or check, and I just happened to decide to check. I'm not sure. Blocking bet, I don't have as much experience with it because I typically would only do it versus fish, and I don't get to play versus fish as much these days, so I'm not really not really so sure about that, like like uh, how that scenario plays out. So I just go with what I would be used to as a check, and he ends up having ace queen, so I just got really lucky. Here with king queen, I would normally re-raise, but again, this guy hasn't been raising that much, and even though he hasn't been raising that much, I still would normally re-raise this versus a fish. But when he's that short and he hasn't been raising that much, I'm going to get it in a ton. With another $40 or 20 big blinds at the table, I could definitely see him defending a lot more. But with that stack, I would see him mostly shoving or folding, and I'd rather just. I mean, you probably shouldn't get it in, but I wouldn't hate getting it in there. But I think that calling is just the most favorable situation for our hand. So I decided to call and just go with the flops that I connect with, and that 9-5-6 is just not one of them, so I just dump it. If the flop was like Jack 9, 10 9, so the flops where I have gutter 2 over, backdoor flush draw, whatever, I would continue. But that flop is just where I just airball and have overs and a backdoor flush draw. I don't think you have enough equity to. You definitely can't float, and I also think it's pretty clear that you don't have enough equity to shove over a bet. One thing I've definitely noticed is that in general, at the beginning of my session, I got 3-bet a couple times, and I thought that they weren't going to let me be stealing that much. But I didn't check my hand, but I know that I end up playing pretty loose this session, and that's a combination of me being given a ton of opportunities to raise just because it was folded to me so much, and because when I did raise, I wasn't getting played back at, so I didn't really have much reason not to go for it in a ton of marginal spots. So anyway, so what I was saying earlier is that my opponents tended to 3-bet me, so I thought they were playing kind of what a standard strategy versus late position opens would be. There's 3-bet me from the blinds, but they ended up not doing that. So I just kind of like ran bad in that small sample, because then overall at the end of the session I just didn't get 3-bet that much. So you can be pretty relentless about stealing in these games, so long as you know what to do post flop, which is mostly being pretty conservative and giving up when you continue, and then knowing when to be greedy and go for bluffs and thin value bets is kind of like learning poker. And I mean, I could just go on and on about that. It's like I'll talk about the spots that come up, but that's like super important and something that you should definitely focus on. So here with 5-4, great example. I mean, I would possibly fold this in tougher games, but when there's 2 unknowns and then 2 fish in the blinds, I'm just raising sick wide here to play pots with the blinds. And this flop, I think the fish will probably check fold a ton. So when I do get check called, I'm going to give up. But on this turn, I think he's unhappy with a lot of his pocket pairs. So I think that a bet is in order for sure. And I'm even going to be a little bit greedy and bet smaller than 3/4 pot because he won't know the difference. And yeah, here with Jack 10, I could see that. I check a lot of ace-high boards just because people generally defend hands that have aces or kings in them. So I don't mind checking down and then reverse straight and go for a value bet. Here with Jack 10, same concept we were talking about earlier. I love to, especially in position, re-raise isolate fish with most of the range that I'm going to continue versus them. And on this flop, I flop gin, so more than happy to get it in. 7-5, even though I want to play pots with that guy, who's a big fish, I think that 7-5, especially out of position, is just simply too weak. It's just such a garbage hand that you're better off probably just dumping it. Here with 10s, I don't think I realized that under the gun limit. I make a couple mistakes in this video, just not realizing the action because I was kind of thinking what. Yeah, I thought these guys were the blinds. I remember this hand, just because I was trying to focus on like kind of what I would talk about. So a couple mistakes, but no big deal. On this flop, yeah, again, I just don't think c-betting 10s even versus 2 fishes, or especially I guess versus 2 fishes, is a good idea. Especially because they're such bad hand readers, I could definitely see you probably are only going to get 1 street of value with 10s unimproved, so I could and since they're fish, they're not really great hand readers. I definitely think that I could get my street, and I think the best street to get is probably the river. So I double check and bet the river. Here with tens, I'm just squeeze getting it in versus a fish who might be a fishy reg, and just some reg. And then yeah, I get triple check too, and I think definitely majority of the time my tens are good here. So definitely a value bet. I think that any pair is calling me, but looks like they likely both had air, which is reasonable on that board. They could have had like Broadways or whatever middle suited cards that just happen to not coordinate with that board. Here with 10-8 in the limped pot, I'm not the greatest at playing limp pots versus regulars because it just never really happens at higher stakes, so I'm just very inexperienced. I bet the flop for value. I bet the turn again for value, which might be marginal. I still beat all of his tens and all of his straight draws. And then on this river, I really only lose to a 7, and he could have definitely picked up 8-6 double or up and down straight draw, and he could have picked up hearts, and he could just be chop betting a 10. So I think I just have to check all this river. And then here with king queen, this is a perfect example of why you should not judge a book by its cover and gain more information about people before you give them notes. You can make guesses based on whatever, but you should. This hand is an example of why this guy is orange right now. So I see that the flop with king queen, he checker is really small. I call it. I don't think there's really any other player from the flop getting. If I get it in, my equity is going to suck. So I'm perfectly fine taking the turn. Turn is gin as far as I'm concerned. If he has a flush, good for him. I'll be getting all this money in one way or the other. And the river. I'm sorry, he check calls, so now I guess he has 2 pair, a set, or a pair plus, sometimes my hand. And very small percentage of the time, he flush that he's checking, but if he has it, I mean, good for him. He can have my money. But then the river's a club, and I think there's 2 problems with this river. The first is that he could have improved, and the second is that even if I have the best hand, it's pretty unlikely that I'm going to get called by worse, so I don't mind going to showdown and learning a bit about my opponent. That's definitely something else to be said for it, is that probably a decent percent of the time with the hands that would be interesting in understanding how your opponent plays, he's probably folding, like the worst hands in the range basically, which he ends up having. So that's something that you don't gain by shoving, and then he just probably folds that hand. So I mean, that's kind of cool. So now I know this guy's a fish, or I label him as a bad reg, and then later discover he's a fish. But yeah, I mean, that's just the defend pre is pretty and then check raising the flop is just really, really bad because there's tons of, I'm probably not bluffing that board all that often. And when I am betting, I'm likely bet calling at least one street, so he's gonna have to play the turn with a hand that has almost no equity. And then yeah, if the turn's the best card for him, it puts him in a bad spot. So yeah, I think just overall is a pretty bad play, and that lets me know that he's at least a bad reg. Here with king 8, I see bet. The guy defends small blind. He's a fish, and I see bet, and he check calls. And here I think sometimes he has some pocket pair. I think the smallest part of his range. Sometimes I think this next part of his range is like suited whatever 8-7, 6-8, whatever, just some 2 cards that happen to be low and connected and connect with this board. And then I think likely the biggest part of his range is ace jack, ace king, ace queen, king queen, just like 2 broadways that floated. And then when he checks here, I don't think he has better than 1 pair. So, and the 7s, I mean, I could have 8-6, I could have a 4, I could have maybe had 7s or river to 7, I don't know. But I just think that with his ace highs and his crappy pairs and just him being a fish, so that I think this bet I can just be kind of greedy and get away with this, even though it's kind of a suspect spot for me to be bluffing. Although, I mean, in some regard, it's a good spot because you would expect maybe a lot of my air to double barrel a 10. 10's a pretty reasonable double barrel card, an overcard that almost will never improve him, but could theoretically improve your hand. Uh, so there's an argument that like, well, you probably don't have a lot of the air hands that he would need you to have to then be calling the river against because they probably just bet the turn. So you had to have something going on with your hand to make it to this spot. But again, the guy's a fish, so that's probably just not how his thought process works. So I think I'll just go with he looks like he has something bad and probably isn't that great of a hand reader, so maybe I'll just bet and try to take it down type logic. Here with 6-9, as much as I want to continue against this guy, he hasn't been raising that much. He doesn't have that much money in his stack, and I'm out of position, and he's under the gun, so yeah, we just dump it. Jack 7 suited. Jack 6 I believe would be the borderline, but I think you could probably raise Jack 7 suited versus anybody who's in the big blind. Although I think playing out of the small blind is extremely, it's like extremely subjective. It matters just the only thing that matters is who's in the big blind. Like, it's not the only thing, but that's like the biggest thing. So paying attention to how much they're letting you get away with stealing in the small blind is extremely important. And the guys that are just really tight and play kind of like a fixed tight range, you should steal a ton. And the guys that just see the flop every time, you really got to shut it down and play. I don't know, 35-ish% of hands, maybe 40, whatever your favorite hands are. Here with ace-jack, cutoff raises. I could 3-bet, 5-bet, but I just don't have that kind of dynamic, and these just aren't the type of guys that do that, so I'm just going to see the flop. In position, just like one of my favorite things to do is take single raise pots in position. And then here with ace-deuce, fish opens, and I'm again just doing my like relentless, just isolate in position, play a pot with him. Ace-jack over and a gutter cards, check to me. I think for sure I have enough equity to go for a bluff. So I bet and stab. And this ace-deuce, this is one of the reasons why 3-betting just almost 2 blank cards is so sick versus fish, is because so often when they call 3-bet out of position and then check, they're giving up. And like when they lead, normally they continue with their hand. So that takes out a lot of the hands that would continue versus a check, which makes a check even more appealing. Because even, let's say they continue with any hand on this board 30% of the time, while let's say half the time they lead hands they continue with. Well, now they only continue when they check 15, or I can't do the math of this and do the commentary, but I mean they're just check voting sick amounts when they take out hands from their leading range. I should mention that if the answer is just 15%, yeah, I can do that while doing commentary, but I thought there might be another conversion, which maybe I'm not thinking about, but I mean, you get the point. Here when I get raised ace-5 suited versus a fish, just to call. I should say in general, because fish are so all over the place in the way they perceive the game, and the one thing that's consistent is that you have a good hand and you get it in with the fish, and they just have like a hilariously terrible hand or a hand that was just completely misplayed. I mean, that's like the one thing that's consistent. And yet, so you can, I mean, obviously just play your value bets, just standard. But I generally don't bluff fish when they're 3-betting so much, just because they're so all over the place. Until I have more information, they're so all over the place. It's just so hard to know how and when. So I'm just very conservative about that because I don't want to spew versus fish. There's just no reason. And because the reason that they get these in these hilarious hands is because they're folding spots they probably should be, and or they're not folding spots they probably should be. So that makes bluffing them kind of crappy. So I tend to just keep it on the tighter side when facing aggression versus fish that I don't have very specific reads on. Also, when he like min raises, God only knows what that means. Although I would guess with this guy it could be ATC because he's just been playing a lot of pots and splashing around and whatever. And this guy's actually been playing so bad. I would almost always re-raise kings here, but when there's somebody in the big blinds that I want to squeeze, or there's a fish that I want to continue, I mean, there's just such a sick amount of equity in getting this guy into the pot that I mean, you almost want to at all costs get him in there. Pot comes ace high, which sucks. So I got two streets at most I'm gonna get from this hand, and if I get the street in on the flop by betting, it's probably the least likely that I'm getting two streets from worse if the one bet that I'm getting is going in on the flop, especially if I'm the aggressor. So I think you got to check the flop. Plus, again, you keep the fish in the pot to bluff or think your hand is weaker than it is. Then when he bets, when the pre-flop raiser checks the flop and then bets the turn, and he ends up having ace-8, which is terrible. He should, it's insane to me that he would check the flop with the fish in the pot. With me in the pot, yeah, sure, he could balance trick me, play trick, whatever. But with the fish in the pot, there's no excuse for not betting. That's a terrible play. And then when he bets the turn, it's just unlikely that he has an ace, so I'm clearly calling. And then when he bets small on the river, I almost thought about raising for value, but then I was like, these guys play pretty bad. He could definitely have an ace here. And I think he could have an ace here, and he's always bet calling a raise with that. And then he could have worse. His range for worse is its bet calling is probably pretty narrow. So, and so I don't know. He could have had fives or who knows, even fours. So I just don't think that I'm getting bet called by worse enough, and I am getting bet called by all the better hands. So I think just showdown, especially with that small bet. I would just showdown and just be very curious, what. It's a really weird line. What hand would take that line? If he showed up with 10 Sir Queens, I'd be like, okay, that's pretty reasonable. But anything else, I'm like, well, Ace Jack, I think the fish just limp calls or something, and I think the best. I could check, but yeah, I think I prefer betting, and it just sucks to face bet out of position. It makes it so much harder to continue with whatever he has. So I don't mind it, especially half pot. He's not gonna exploit that anyway.